It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon in Oakwood Hills. This was a small, quiet neighborhood where houses sat close together, and kids played in the yards. Everyone knew each other, or at least, that's what they thought. The streets were lined with green grass, pretty flowers, and big trees that made shady spots. Birds chirped, and the air smelled like fresh-cut lawns. It was the kind of day where you'd want to be outside, maybe kicking a ball or eating ice cream. Everything seemed perfect. But something big was about to happen, and no one saw it coming. Jake Miller was just a regular guy. He was 25 years old, not too old and not too young. He lived in a little house with a small front yard. That yard wasn't fancy, but Jake liked it just fine. He had a lawnmower, a few tools, and his favorite thing, a Bluetooth radio. That radio was small, black, and shiny. It could play music from his phone, and Jake loved it. On this sunny day, he decided it was time to mow his lawn. So, he pulled on his old sneakers, grabbed his lawnmower, and turned on his radio. The music started playing, not too loud, just loud enough to make him smile while he worked. The tunes floated through the air. They were happy songs, the kind you'd hum along to without even thinking. Jake pushed the lawnmower back and forth, cutting the grass in neat lines. The sun was warm on his face, and a little sweat dripped down his forehead. He didn't mind. He liked being outside, feeling the breeze, and hearing his music. To him, this was a perfect day. But not everyone felt the same way. Oh no, someone was watching, and that someone was about to make a big fuss. That someone was Linda Grayson. Linda was the boss of the HOA, which stands for Homeowners Association. The HOA was a group that made rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass could be or where you could park your car. Linda took her job very seriously. Too seriously, if you ask most people. She was older than Jake, with sharp eyes and a loud voice. She always carried a clipboard, scribbling notes about everything she saw. If your trash can was out too long, Linda would know. If your dog barked one time too many, Linda would write it down. She acted like the neighborhood was her kingdom, and she was the queen. Everyone called her HOA Karen when she wasn't around. They didn't say it to her face, of course. That would be asking for trouble. But behind her back. Oh, they whispered it all the time. There goes HOA Karen again, they'd say, rolling their eyes. What's she mad about now? Linda didn't care if people liked her or not. She just wanted everything to be perfect, her kind of perfect. And on this sunny Saturday, Jake's music was not part of her perfect plan. Jake didn't know it yet, but Linda was standing on her porch, watching him. Her house was right across the street from his. It was a big house with white paint and a fancy front door. Linda liked to stand there, arms crossed, staring at the neighborhood like a hawk. She saw Jake mowing. She heard the music coming from his radio. And she didn't like it one bit. To her, that music was noise. Loud, annoying noise. Even though it wasn't loud at all, just a little beat you could barely hear unless you were close, it bugged her. Linda didn't want any noise in her quiet kingdom. Jake kept mowing, totally clueless. He was in his own world, pushing the lawnmower and nodding his head to the song. The grass clippings flew around, sticking to his shoes. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and kept going. The lawn was starting to look nice, all even and green. He was proud of it. But Linda? She wasn't proud. She was mad. Really mad. Her face got all scrunched up, like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. She muttered to herself, that boy and his radio. Who does he think he is? Now, Jake wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just a guy who liked music and a neat lawn. He'd lived in Oakwood Hills for a few months, and he mostly kept to himself. He said hi to the neighbors, waved at the kids riding bikes, and never broke any big rules. Sure, his grass got a little tall sometimes, but he always mowed it before Linda could complain. At least, he thought he did. He didn't know Linda had been watching him for weeks, waiting for a reason to yell. Linda wasn't like most people. Most folks in Oakwood Hills were nice. They'd chat about the weather or share cookies at Christmas. But Linda? She didn't chat. She didn't share. She judged. She'd walk up and down the street with her clipboard, looking for things to fix. One time, she told Mrs. Carter her flowers were too bright. Too bright? Can you believe that? Mrs. Carter just laughed it off, but Linda didn't laugh. She wrote it on her clipboard and marched away. That's the kind of person Linda was. Jake, though. He was different. He didn't care about silly rules. He just wanted to live his life. He had short brown hair, a friendly smile, and a laid-back way about him. If you met him, you'd like him right away. The neighbors did. Old Mr. Jenkins next door would sit on his porch and wave at Jake every morning. The kids down the street liked him too. They'd ask him to toss their football back when it landed in his yard. Jake was cool like that. But Linda didn't think he was cool. Not at all. Back to that sunny Saturday. Jake was almost done mowing. The lawn looked great, and the music was still playing. He sang a little under his breath, not loud enough for anyone to hear. He was happy. The day was good. The sun was shining. What could go wrong? Well, a lot, actually. Because Linda had made up her mind. That radio. It had to go. She wasn't going to let Jake ruin her perfect, quiet day. Linda stepped off her porch and started walking toward Jake's yard. Her shoes clicked on the pavement, sharp and fast. She held her clipboard tight, like it was a shield. Her eyes were locked on Jake, and her mouth was a thin, angry line. She looked like a storm cloud rolling in on a sunny day. Jake didn't see her yet. He was too busy pushing the lawnmower, turning it around for one last row. The music kept playing, soft and cheerful. But the cheerfulness was about to end. Here's the thing about Jake, he wasn't just a regular guy. Nope. There was something special about him, something Linda didn't know. Nobody knew, not even the nice neighbors who waved at him every day. Jake had a secret. A big one. And it wasn't just about his radio or his lawn. It was something that could change everything in Oakwood Hills. Linda thought she was the boss, the queen of the street. But she was about to find out she was very, very wrong. Let's rewind a little. Jake moved to Oakwood Hills a few months ago. He showed up one day with a moving truck and a big smile. The neighbors were curious. Who was this new guy? He seemed normal enough. He unpacked his stuff, some furniture, a TV, that Bluetooth radio, and settled in. He didn't throw loud parties or cause trouble. He just lived quietly, mowing his lawn and saying hi to people. But there was more to Jake than met the eye. Way more. See, Jake wasn't just there to live a normal life. He had a reason for being in Oakwood Hills. A secret reason. He didn't tell anyone, not Mr. Jenkins, not the kids with the football, and definitely not Linda. He kept it hidden, tucked away like a treasure chest buried in the sand. Every day, he went about his business, acting like nothing was up. He mowed his lawn. He played his music. He smiled and waved. But all the while, he was watching. Waiting. Planning. Linda didn't suspect a thing. To her, Jake was just some young guy who didn't follow her rules. She didn't like that. She liked control. She liked telling people what to do. If your mailbox was crooked, she'd knock on your door. If your car was parked an inch too close to the curb, she'd leave a note. Linda thought she knew everything about everyone. But Jake? He was a mystery she couldn't figure out. And that made her mad. Back to the lawn. Jake finished his last row and turned off the lawnmower. The blade stopped spinning, and the yard was quiet except for the music. That little radio kept going, playing its happy tune. Jake wiped his hands on his shorts and looked around. The grass was perfect. He felt good. He reached for a water bottle and took a big sip. That's when he heard it, the sound of Linda's shoes clicking closer. He turned his head and saw her coming. She was halfway across the street now, moving fast. Her clipboard was still in her hand, and her face was all twisted up with anger. Jake raised an eyebrow. What was her problem? He didn't know yet, but he was about to find out. Linda stopped right at the edge of his yard, her shoes on the grass he'd just mowed. She pointed at the radio and shouted, "Turn that thing off." Jake blinked. He wasn't scared, just surprised. "It's not even loud," he said, keeping his voice calm. "What's the big deal?" But Linda didn't want to hear it. She shook her head, her voice getting louder. "This is a quiet neighborhood, Jake. You can't just play music whenever you want. I make the rules here." Jake looked at her, then at the radio, then back at her. He didn't say anything for a second. He just stood there, thinking. Most people would have argued back. Most people would have told Linda to mind her own business. But Jake? He didn't. He just smiled a little, a tiny, sneaky smile. That smile made Linda even madder. She didn't know why he was smiling. She didn't know what he was thinking. And she definitely didn't know who he really was. Linda thought she had the upper hand. She thought she could boss Jake around like she bossed everyone else. She'd done it before. Like the time she made Mr. Jenkins repaint his fence because it was too gray. Or the time she told the Thompsons their Halloween decorations were too scary for the neighborhood. Linda always won. Or so she thought. But this time? This time was different. Jake wasn't like Mr. Jenkins or the Thompsons. He wasn't going to back down so easy. The sun was still shining, the birds were still chirping, and the neighborhood was still quiet except for that little radio. It kept playing, soft and steady. Linda glared at it like it was her worst enemy. To her, it was more than just music. It was a challenge. A rebellion. Jake wasn't following her rules, and that made her blood boil. She took a step closer, her voice sharp as a knife. I'm warning you, Jake. Turn it off, or I'll make you sorry. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't turn it off. He just stood there, looking at her with that same small smile. Okay, Linda, he said, nice and slow. Do what you gotta do. His voice was calm, almost too calm. It was like he knew something she didn't. And he did. Oh, he definitely did. Linda huffed. She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, her shoes clicking even louder now. She was done talking. She had a plan. Jake watched her go, still smiling. He didn't know exactly what she was going to do, but he had a pretty good guess. And he wasn't worried. Not one bit. Why? Because Jake had something up his sleeve. Something big. Something Linda never saw coming. The neighborhood stayed quiet for a minute. The kids down the street kept playing. Mr. Jenkins rocked on his porch. The sun kept shining. Jake picked up his water bottle again and took another sip. He glanced at his radio, still playing its happy song. Then he looked across the street at Linda's house. She was inside now, probably plotting something. Jake didn't mind. Let her plot. Let her try. He was ready. See, Jake wasn't just mowing his lawn that day. He wasn't just playing music to have fun. He was waiting for something he'd been working on for a long time. Linda thought she was the queen of Oakwood Hills. She thought she could scare Jake into doing what she wanted. But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know who Jake really was. And that was her biggest mistake. The day was still young. The sun was high in the sky, and the grass smelled fresh. Jake's radio kept going, filling the air with its little tune. Across the street, Linda was about to make a move. She thought she was in charge. She thought she could win. But Jake? He was about to show her and everyone else that things weren't what they seemed. And that's where our story starts to get really good. Because Jake Miller, the guy with the lawnmower and the Bluetooth radio, was about to turn Oakwood Hills upside down. Linda had no idea who she was messing with. But she was going to find out. Soon. Very soon. Jake was halfway through mowing his lawn. The sun was shining bright in the sky, making everything warm and happy. His little black Bluetooth radio sat on the grass, playing music not too loud, just a fun little tune. Jake pushed the lawnmower back and forth, cutting the grass into nice, straight lines. He was sweaty, but he didn't mind. He liked the way the yard was starting to look all neat and tidy. Everything was going great. Until Linda showed up. Linda Grayson stormed over from across the street. Her face was redder than a big, juicy tomato. She looked mad, really, really mad. Her arms were swinging, and her shoes made loud clicking sounds on the pavement. She stopped right at the edge of Jake's yard, standing on the fresh-cut grass. She pointed at his radio with a shaky finger, like it was some kind of crime scene. "Turn that noise off," she yelled. Her voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the air like a whistle. "This is a peaceful neighborhood, and you're ruining it." Jake stopped pushing the lawnmower for a second. He looked up at her, wiping sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. He wasn't mad or scared. He just smiled a small, calm smile. "It's not even loud, Linda," he said, "nice and easy." Chill out. His voice was soft, like he didn't have a worry in the world. He didn't think Linda was a big deal. To him, she was just being silly. But Linda didn't chill out. Oh no. She got even madder. Her face turned from red to almost purple, and her eyes got all narrow and mean. She stomped her foot hard on the ground, like a little kid throwing a fit. I'm serious, Jake, she shouted. This is my neighborhood, and I won't let you mess it up with that awful noise. She kept pointing at the radio, her finger jabbing the air like she wanted to poke it right through the little black box. Jake tilted his head and looked at her. He didn't say anything right away. He just watched her, still smiling that tiny smile. Linda's yelling didn't scare him. He wasn't the kind of guy who got upset over stuff like this. He shrugged his shoulders, like it was no big thing. Okay, Linda, he said, super calm. Then he reached down and turned the volume on the radio down just a tiny bit. It was still playing, but now it was even quieter. He didn't turn it off, though. Nope. He wasn't going to let Linda boss him around that easy. Then he grabbed the lawnmower again and kept mowing, like she wasn't even there. Linda's mouth dropped open. She couldn't believe it. Jake didn't turn the radio off. He didn't do what she said. She stood there, staring at him, her hands on her hips. She was the HOA president, didn't he know that? Didn't he know she made the rules? In her mind, everyone had to listen to her. Everyone had to do what she wanted. But Jake? He wasn't listening. He was mowing his lawn and ignoring her, and that made her so mad she could hardly think straight. I'm warning you, Jake, she yelled again, her voice louder than before. I'll call the cops if you don't stop right now. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and held it up, shaking it at him. I mean it. I'll call them, and they'll come make you turn that thing off. Her eyes were wild, and her hair was bouncing as she waved her arms around. She looked like she was ready to explode. Jake didn't stop mowing. He just kept going, pushing the lawnmower back and forth. The blades whirred, cutting the grass nice and even. He glanced at Linda, still smiling that little smile. Go ahead, he said, super relaxed. Call them if you want. He didn't sound scared. He didn't sound worried. It was like he didn't care at all. He shrugged again and turned back to his lawn, letting the music play on. Linda froze. She wasn't used to this. Normally, when she yelled at people, they listened. They turned off their music, or moved their trash cans, or fixed whatever she didn't like. But Jake? He wasn't doing what she said. He was acting like she was just a noisy fly buzzing around his head. That made her madder than ever. She huffed and puffed, her chest going up and down fast. Fine, she snapped. You asked for it? Then she turned around and marched back toward her house, her shoes clicking even louder on the street. Jake watched her go. He didn't say anything. He just kept mowing, the lawnmower humming along. The radio played its soft little tune, and the sun kept shining. Everything seemed normal again for a minute. But things weren't normal. Not really. Because Linda wasn't just mad. She was planning something. And Jake? He wasn't just some guy mowing his lawn. He had a secret. A big, giant secret. And Linda had no idea what she was walking into. Let's talk about Linda for a second. She wasn't always this bossy. Well, maybe she was, but it got worse when she became the HOA president. That job made her feel important. She loved walking around with her clipboard, telling people what to do. She'd knock on doors and say things like, your grass is too long, or your car's too close to the sidewalk. Most people didn't argue with her. They just nodded and fixed whatever she complained about. It made her feel powerful, like she was the queen of Oakwood Hills. But Jake wasn't like most people. He didn't nod. He didn't fix things just because Linda said so. He did his own thing. And that drove Linda crazy. She'd been watching him ever since he moved in a few months ago. She didn't like how he didn't follow every single rule. His grass wasn't always perfect. Sometimes he left his trash can out an extra day. And now this radio. To Linda, it was like Jake was laughing at her. Like he was saying, I don't care about your rules. And she couldn't stand that. Back to the yard. Jake kept mowing, nice and steady. The lawn was looking great now, almost done. The grass was short and green, and the air smelled fresh and clean. He liked that smell. It made him feel good. The radio kept playing, so quiet you could barely hear it unless you were standing right next to it. Jake didn't think it was a problem. It wasn't loud enough to bother anyone except Linda, of course. But Linda wasn't happy unless everything was perfect, and to her, Jake's music wasn't perfect. Across the street, Linda was inside her house now. She slammed the door behind her, still fuming. She tossed her clipboard onto the table and grabbed her phone. She was serious about calling the cops. She wasn't joking. She dialed 911 and waited, tapping her foot fast. When someone answered, she didn't even say hello. She just started talking, loud and fast. "Hello, yes, I need help. There's a boy in my neighborhood playing loud music, and it's ruining everything. You need to send someone right now." The person on the phone tried to ask questions, but Linda didn't stop. "It's a Bluetooth radio," she said. "He's mowing his lawn, and he won't turn it off. This is a peaceful place, and he's breaking the rules." She kept going, her voice getting higher and higher. She sounded like she was about to cry or scream. Maybe both. She thought the cops would come running to save her perfect neighborhood. She thought she'd win, just like always. Outside, Jake didn't know Linda was on the phone. He couldn't hear her. He was too busy finishing his lawn. The last few rows were all that was left. He pushed the lawnmower slow and careful, making sure every bit of grass was even. He liked things neat, but he wasn't picky like Linda. He just wanted his yard to look nice. The music played on, soft and happy. Jake hummed a little, tapping his foot to the beat. He wasn't worried about Linda. Not yet. But here's the thing, Jake should have been worried. Not because Linda was right, she wasn't. That music wasn't loud enough to bother anyone sensible. No, he should have been worried because Linda didn't give up easy. She was like a dog with a bone. When she wanted something, she kept going until she got it. And right now, she wanted Jake to stop. She wanted him to listen to her. She wanted him to know she was the boss. Jake didn't know it, but Linda's call was about to make things crazy. The cops wouldn't just laugh and hang up. They'd come. Not because of the radio, oh no, that wasn't the real reason. They'd come because of something else. Something bigger. Something Jake knew about, and Linda didn't. That secret he had. It was starting to wiggle its way out, like a worm poking through the dirt. And when it came out, everything would change. Let's slow down for a minute. Picture this, Jake in his yard, mowing away. The sun is high, the sky is blue, and the neighborhood is quiet except for that little radio. Across the street, Linda's pacing in her house, yelling into her phone. She thinks she's in control. She thinks she's going to teach Jake a lesson. She's wrong, but she doesn't know it yet. The tension is building, like a rubber band stretching tighter and tighter. Something's going to snap. Soon. Jake finished the last row. He turned off the lawnmower and stepped back to look at his work. The yard was perfect now, all green and smooth. He smiled, happy with it. He picked up his water bottle and took a big sip, the cold water feeling good after all that work. The radio kept playing, soft as a whisper. He didn't turn it off. Why should he? It wasn't hurting anyone. He sat down on the grass for a second, stretching his legs out. He looked around the neighborhood. Kids were riding bikes down the street. Old Mr. Jenkins waved from his porch. Everything seemed fine. But it wasn't fine. Not really. Linda was still on the phone, and she wasn't giving up. "Yes, his name is Jake Miller," she said to the 911 person. "He lives across from me. You need to hurry." She was sure the cops would come and shut Jake down. She could already see it in her head, police cars pulling up, lights flashing, officers telling Jake to turn off that radio. She'd stand there with her arms crossed, smiling, knowing she'd won. Jake didn't hear any of that. He was just sitting there, enjoying the day. He didn't know Linda was making that call. He didn't know what was coming. But he wasn't scared. Why? Because he had that secret. That big, sneaky secret. Linda thought he was just some random guy with a lawnmower. She thought he was nobody special. She was so wrong. Jake wasn't random. He wasn't nobody. He was somebody important. And Linda was about to find out. The air felt thicker now. Not because of the weather, it was still sunny and nice, but because of what was happening. Linda's anger was like a dark cloud, creeping closer. Jake's calm smile was like a shield, keeping him safe. They were opposites, Linda all loud and bossy, Jake all quiet and cool. She thought she had power. He knew he did. And that difference? It was going to make everything explode. Linda hung up the phone. She looked out her window at Jake, sitting there on his lawn. She smirked. "You're in trouble now," she muttered to herself. She thought the cops were on their way to fix her problem. She thought she'd scare Jake into line. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know Jake wasn't scared at all. He wasn't even worried. He was ready. Jake stood up and brushed the grass off his shorts. He glanced at Linda's house. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was up to something. He could feel it. That little smile stayed on his face. He picked up his radio and moved it closer to the porch, still letting it play. He wasn't going to stop. Not for Linda. Not for anyone. He had a reason for being here, a reason for acting so calm. And that reason? It was bigger than Linda's rules. Bigger than her clipboard. Bigger than Oakwood Hills. The tension was thick now. You could almost touch it. Linda thought she was winning. Jake knew she wasn't. The neighborhood kept going like nothing was wrong, kids laughing, birds singing, lawns growing. But something was wrong. Something big was brewing. Linda's threat wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a spark. And that spark was about to light a fire. What Linda didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Jake wasn't just some guy with a lawnmower. He had a secret, something huge. And it wasn't just going to surprise her. It was going to turn her whole world upside down. She thought she was the queen of this little kingdom. She thought she could boss everyone around. But Jake? He was about to show her she wasn't as powerful as she thought. Not even close. Linda didn't waste a single second. She was standing right there in Jake's yard, her face still red and mad. She yanked her phone out of her pocket so fast it almost flew out of her hand. She pressed the buttons hard, 9-1-1, and held the phone up to her ear. She didn't even wait for the person to say hi. "Yes, hello, there's a disturbance," she screeched, her voice loud and squeaky like a bird that got stepped on. "This boy's playing loud music, and it's ruining our neighborhood. Send someone now." She waved her other hand around, pointing at Jake's little black radio like it was the worst thing in the world. Jake stood there, just a few steps away. He watched her with his arms crossed, shaking his head a little. He didn't look mad or scared. He looked calm, like he thought Linda was being silly. The lawnmower was quiet now. He'd finished cutting the grass and the radio was still playing its soft tune. It wasn't loud at all. You could barely hear it unless you were right next to it. But Linda? She acted like it was a giant boombox blasting through the whole street. Jake could have argued with her. He could have said, "It's not loud, Linda. Stop being crazy." But he didn't. Nope. He stayed quiet, just watching her yell into the phone. While Linda was busy shouting, Jake did something sneaky. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own phone. He turned away a little, so Linda wouldn't see, and made a quick call. His voice was super quiet, way too quiet for Linda to hear. She didn't even notice. She was too busy flapping her arms and talking loud. "Yes, it's a Bluetooth radio," she told the 911 person. "He's out here mowing his lawn and playing music, and he won't stop. This is a peaceful place, and he's breaking all the rules." She kept going, her voice getting higher and higher, like she was about to pop. Jake finished his call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He didn't say a word about it. He just stood there, looking at Linda with that same small smile he always had. It was like he knew something she didn't. And he did. Oh, he definitely did. But Linda? She was too worked up to care. She thought she was winning. She thought calling the cops would fix everything. She thought Jake would finally have to listen to her. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. The sun was still up, shining bright over Oakwood Hills. The neighborhood was quiet, except for Linda's yelling and the soft hum of Jake's radio. Kids were riding bikes down the street, their laughter bouncing around. Old Mr. Jenkins sat on his porch, rocking in his chair and watching the whole thing. He didn't say anything, but he raised an eyebrow, like he was curious about what would happen next. The air felt warm and still, but something was changing. Something big was coming. You could almost feel it, like a storm creeping closer. A few minutes passed. Linda hung up the phone and stuffed it back in her pocket. She turned to Jake and crossed her arms tight across her chest. She smirked a big, proud smirk. "See," she said, her voice all smug. "I told you I'd handle this." She tilted her head up, like she'd just won a prize. She thought the cops were coming to shut Jake down. She thought they'd pull up, tell him to turn off the radio, and maybe even give him a ticket. In her mind, she was the hero of Oakwood Hills, saving the neighborhood from Jake's noise. Jake didn't say anything back. He just looked at her, shaking his head again. That little smile stayed on his face. He didn't argue. He didn't laugh. He just stood there, cool as a cucumber. Linda didn't get why he wasn't mad or scared. Most people would be. Most people would yell back or beg her not to call the cops. But Jake? He didn't care. And that made Linda's smirk wobble just a tiny bit. Why wasn't he worried? Why wasn't he fighting? She didn't understand. Not yet. Then it happened. A police car rolled up the street. Its tires crunched on the pavement, slow and steady. The car was white with blue stripes, and its lights weren't flashing, no sirens, no big noise. It just pulled up quiet and smooth, stopping right in front of Jake's house. Linda's smirk got bigger. She clapped her hands together once, like she'd just scored a point. "Ha," she said, looking at Jake. "They're here. You're in trouble now." She was so sure she'd won. So sure the cops were there for him. Jake looked at the car too. He didn't move. He didn't run. He just stood there, watching. The radio kept playing its soft little song, and the grass smelled fresh from the mowing. Everything seemed normal except it wasn't. Something weird was about to happen. Something Linda didn't expect. Something that would wipe that smirk right off her face. Two cops stepped out of the car. One was tall with short hair, and the other was shorter with a hat pulled low over his eyes. They shut the doors thump, thump, and started walking. Linda straightened up, ready to tell them all about Jake's crime. She took a step forward, her arms still crossed, her chin high. She was ready to point at the radio and say, "There it is. That's the problem. Make him stop." She thought they'd listen to her, just like everyone else always did. But then surprise. The cops didn't walk toward Jake. Nope. They turned and headed straight for Linda. Their shoes clicked on the pavement, steady and sure. Linda's smirk froze. Her eyes got wide, and her mouth opened a little. "Wait, what's going on?" she stammered, her voice shaky now. She took a step back, confused. The cops kept coming, their faces serious. They weren't smiling. They weren't looking at Jake. They were looking at her. Jake watched it all happen. He leaned against his lawnmower, casual as can be. That little smile stayed on his face, but now it looked a tiny bit bigger. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Something was up, and he knew it. Linda didn't, though. She was starting to panic. "What are you doing?" she asked the cops, her voice getting loud again. "He's the problem. Over there. The radio." She pointed at Jake, her hand shaking now. The tall cop stopped right in front of her. He looked down at her with calm eyes. "Linda Grayson," he said, his voice deep and steady. Linda blinked fast. "Why yes, that's me," she said, swallowing hard. She didn't know why he was asking her name. She didn't know why he was standing so close. She thought the cops were there for Jake, not her. She was wrong. Very wrong. The shorter cop stepped up too. He pulled a little notebook out of his pocket and flipped it open. "We need to talk to you," he said, looking at Linda over the top of his hat. "Can you come with us?" Linda's face went pale. Her smirk was gone now, totally gone. Her arms dropped to her sides, and she shook her head fast. "No, no, you've got it all wrong," she said. "I called you. I'm the one who needs help. He's the one breaking the rules." She pointed at Jake again, her finger wobbling. Jake didn't move. He just watched, quiet and still. The radio kept playing, soft and happy. The cops didn't even look at it. They didn't look at Jake either. They kept their eyes on Linda. The tall cop shook his head. "This isn't about the music," he said. "This is about something else." Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. What was happening? Why were they talking to her? What did they mean? Across the street, Mr. Jenkins stopped rocking in his chair. He leaned forward, squinting at the scene. The kids on their bikes slowed down, staring too. Neighbors started peeking out their windows, pulling back curtains to see what was going on. Something big was happening. Something weird. Linda's call to 911 was supposed to get Jake in trouble. But now it looked like she was the one in trouble. How did that happen? Jake knew how. That secret he had, the big one, was starting to come out. He'd made that quiet phone call for a reason. He wasn't just some guy with a lawnmower and a radio. He was something more. Something Linda never guessed. She thought she was the boss of Oakwood Hills. She thought she could call the cops and fix everything. But Jake? He'd been waiting for this. He'd been watching her. And now, the tables were turning. Linda took another step back. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice loud but shaky. "I'm the HOA president. I keep this place safe. He's the one you want." She pointed at Jake again, desperate now. The cops didn't budge. The tall one crossed his arms. "We know who you are, Ms. Grayson," he said. "That's why we're here." Linda's eyes got even wider. Her hands started to shake. What did he mean? Why were they there for her? Jake finally moved. He pushed off the lawnmower and stood up straight. He didn't say anything, but he looked at Linda with that little smile. It wasn't a mean smile. It wasn't a happy smile either. It was a knowing smile, like he'd seen this coming all along. Linda caught his eye and froze. For the first time, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. For the first time, she wondered who Jake really was. The cops took another step closer to Linda. The tall one reached for something on his belt, a pair of handcuffs. Linda gasped. "No, no, no," she said, backing up more. "You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong." But the cops didn't stop. They kept moving toward her, slow and steady. The shorter one flipped another page in his notebook. "We've got some questions for you," he said. "About the HOA. About money." Linda's face went white. "Money? What money?" She shook her head fast. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. But her voice sounded different now, scared, not mad. The neighbors watching from their windows started whispering. Mr. Jenkins leaned forward even more, his mouth open. The kids on their bikes stopped riding completely, just staring. Something was wrong. Something big. Jake stayed quiet. He didn't need to say anything. He'd known this was coming. That phone call he made? It wasn't to a friend or his mom. It was to someone else, someone who knew things. Someone who'd been waiting for Linda to slip up. And calling 911? That was her slip up. She thought she was smart. She thought she was in charge. But Jake? He'd been one step ahead the whole time. Linda's eyes darted around. She looked at the cops, then at Jake, then at the neighbors watching. She was trapped. Her perfect little kingdom was falling apart, and she didn't know why. "This is his fault," she yelled, pointing at Jake one last time. "He's the one you should arrest." But the cops didn't listen. They kept closing in, their faces serious. Jake shook his head again, just a little. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to yell. The truth was coming out, bit by bit. Linda didn't know it yet, but she was about to learn something huge. That radio she hated? That lawnmower she complained about? They were nothing. Jake was more than just a guy with music. He was someone special. Someone who'd been watching her for a long time. And now, she was starting to see it. The tension was thick now. You could feel it in the air. Linda's yelling had stopped, replaced by scared little noises. The cops were close, ready to do something big. Jake stood there, calm and quiet, his secret peeking out like a shadow growing longer. The neighborhood wasn't so peaceful anymore. Something was happening. Something wild. And it wasn't over yet. The police car was parked right there in front of Jake's house. Its white paint gleamed in the sunny afternoon, and the two cops stood tall on the pavement. The tall one, with short hair and a serious face, took a big step forward. He looked straight at Linda, his eyes steady and calm. "Linda Grayson?" he asked, his voice deep and clear. Linda blinked fast, her mouth still open from all her yelling. She nodded, but she looked confused like she didn't know what was happening. "Yes, that's me," she said, her voice wobbly now. The cop didn't smile. He didn't look happy or mad. He just kept his face serious, like he had something important to say. "We've been looking for you," he told her. "You're under arrest for fraud and stealing HOA funds." His words hit the air like a loud bang, even though he said them quiet and slow. Linda's eyes got huge. Her jaw dropped so low it almost touched the ground. She stood there, frozen, like a statue made of shock. "What?" she shouted, her voice exploding out of her. "This is ridiculous. Arrest him." She spun around and pointed at Jake with a shaky finger. Her face was red again, but not from anger this time, from panic. She waved her arm at Jake, who was still standing by his lawnmower, calm as ever. "He's the one breaking the rules. He's the problem. Not me," she yelled, her words tumbling out fast and loud. She thought the cops would listen. She thought they'd turn around and grab Jake instead. She was wrong. The cops didn't move toward Jake. They didn't even look at him. The tall one pulled out a shiny pair of handcuffs from his belt. They jingled a little as he held them up. The shorter cop, the one with the hat, stepped closer to Linda too. He had his little notebook in his hand, and he nodded at the tall cop like they'd done this 100 times before. Linda's eyes darted between them, wide and wild. "No, no, no," she said, shaking her head fast. "You've got the wrong person. I didn't do anything." But the cops didn't stop. They kept coming closer, slow and steady. The neighbors, who'd been watching from their windows, started whispering louder now. Curtains moved, and faces peeked out. Old Mr. Jenkins leaned so far forward in his rocking chair he almost fell off. The kids on their bikes dropped their feet to the ground, staring with big eyes. Something huge was happening, and everyone could feel it. The air was buzzing, like right before a thunderstorm. Jake finally spoke up. He'd been quiet this whole time, just watching with that little smile on his face. Now, he stepped forward a tiny bit, his hands in his pockets. His voice was calm, super calm, like he was talking about the weather. "Oh, by the way, Linda," he said, looking right at her. "I'm not just some boy. I'm an undercover investigator. Been watching you for months. That's why the cops were already on their way before you even called." The words hung in the air like a big, bright spotlight. Everyone heard them. Linda's face went white like all the color drained out of it in 1 second. Her mouth opened again, but no sound came out. She looked at Jake like she'd never seen him before. The neighbors gasped, their whispers turning into little shouts of "What?" and "No way." Mr. Jenkins clapped a hand over his mouth, his eyes huge. The kids on their bikes started giggling, like they couldn't believe it. The whole street was buzzing now, alive with shock. Linda stumbled back a step. You're lying," she stammered, her voice cracking. "That's not true. You're just a kid with a stupid radio." She pointed at the little black box still sitting on the grass, playing its soft tune. She wanted to believe Jake was making it up. She wanted to believe she was still in charge. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The tall cop shook his head. "He's not lying, Ms. Grayson," he said, holding up the handcuffs. "We've got proof. Lots of it." The shorter cop flipped a page in his notebook and started reading out loud. "Receipts. Emails. Bank records. All showing you took money from the HOA. Money that wasn't yours." His voice was quiet but strong, like he was reading a list of chores. Linda's knees wobbled. She grabbed the edge of her clipboard, which she'd picked up again, like it could save her. Jake tilted his head, still smiling that calm little smile. "You've been busy, Linda," he said. "Bossing everyone around, making rules, acting like the queen. But while you were yelling at me about my radio, I was collecting stuff. Stuff that shows what you've been doing." He didn't sound mad or mean. He sounded like he was just telling a story Linda didn't want to hear. Linda's eyes darted around. She looked at the cops, then at Jake, then at the neighbors staring from their houses. "No," she shouted again. "This is a mistake. I didn't steal anything. I'm the HOA president. I make this place better." But her voice was getting weaker, like she didn't even believe herself anymore. The cop stepped closer, and the tall one reached out with the handcuffs. "Hands behind your back, please," he said, nice but firm. Linda shook her head fast. "No, no, no," she said, backing up more. "You can't do this. I called you. I'm the victim here." She pointed at Jake one last time, her hand shaking so hard it looked like it might fall off. But the cops didn't listen. They kept moving toward her, slow and sure. The shorter cop put his notebook away and grabbed Linda's arm gently. "Let's go," he said. "We'll sort this out at the station." The neighbors were going wild now. Windows opened, and people leaned out, shouting questions. "What's happening?" yelled Mrs. Carter from down the street. "Did she really steal money?" called someone else. Mr. Jenkins stood up from his chair, waving his cane. "I knew she was trouble," he hollered. The kids on their bikes started laughing and pointing, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Oakwood Hills wasn't quiet anymore, it was loud with surprise and chatter. Jake just stood there, watching it all. He didn't cheer or clap. He didn't need to. His secret was out now, and it was a big one. He wasn't just some guy who moved in a few months ago. He wasn't just a kid with a lawnmower and a radio. He was an undercover investigator, someone who'd been sent to watch Linda. For months, he'd been living in that little house, acting normal, mowing his lawn, waving at the neighbors. But all that time, he'd been sneaky. He'd been collecting proof papers, emails, bank stuff that showed Linda was a thief. Linda's head spun around. She looked at Jake again, her eyes full of shock and fear. You tricked me," she said, her voice small now. "You pretended to be nobody." Jake shrugged, still calm. "I didn't pretend," he said. "I just didn't tell you. You were too busy yelling to notice." He pointed at the radio. "That little thing? It kept you distracted. While you were mad about it, I was finding out what you did." The tall cop clicked the handcuffs onto Linda's wrists. They made a sharp little sound, click, click, and her hands were stuck behind her back. She gasped, pulling at them, but they wouldn't budge. "This isn't fair," she cried. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the proof Jake had found said different. He'd been sneaky and smart, gathering it all up while Linda bossed everyone around. Receipts showing she spent HOA money on fancy stuff for herself. Emails where she told lies to cover it up. Bank records proving she took cash that belonged to the neighborhood. It was all there, and Jake had it. The shorter cop started walking Linda toward the police car. She dragged her feet, still yelling. "You can't take me. I'm important. I run this place." But nobody was listening anymore. The neighbors were too busy talking to each other, pointing at her and Jake. Mr. Jenkins shook his head, muttering, "Should have known. Too bossy for her own good." The kids on their bikes cheered, like Jake was a superhero. And maybe he was, in a way. Jake watched the cops lead Linda away. He didn't move from his spot by the lawnmower. The radio kept playing, soft and happy, like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Linda's perfect little world was falling apart, and Jake was the one who made it happen. He'd been quiet for months, living in that little house, acting like a regular guy. But all that time, he'd been watching her. He'd seen her take money from the HOA, money people paid to fix the streets and keep the parks nice. She'd used it for herself instead, buying things like new shoes and fancy dinners. How did Jake find out? He was smart. He'd moved into Oakwood Hills with a job to do. Someone, maybe the police, maybe someone higher up, had told him to watch Linda. They'd heard rumors she was stealing, but they needed proof. So Jake came in, pretending to be just another neighbor. He mowed his lawn. He played his radio. He smiled and waved. But behind that smile, he was busy. He checked her trash for tossed receipts. He listened when she bragged about new stuff she bought. He even got into her emails. Don't ask how, he's just that good, and found messages where she lied about the money. Linda never suspected a thing. She thought Jake was just some annoying kid who didn't follow her rules. She'd march around with her clipboard, yelling about grass and trash cans, while Jake quietly put the pieces together. Every time she bossed him around, he'd nod and smile, but he was thinking, "Keep talking, Linda. I'm getting closer." And he did. He got closer and closer until he had everything he needed. Now, standing there in his yard, Jake looked around. The neighbors were still buzzing, their voices loud with excitement. The cops were putting Linda in the back of the police car. She was still shouting, but it sounded weaker now, like she knew she was done. "This isn't over," she yelled as the door shut. But it was over. The tall cop climbed into the driver's seat, and the shorter one got in next to him. The car started up, its engine humming, and pulled away slow and steady. Jake took a deep breath. The sun was still shining, the grass still smelled fresh, and the radio still played its little tune. He'd done it. Months of watching, waiting, and collecting, all leading up to this moment. Linda's jaw had dropped when she heard the truth, and the neighbors had gasped when Jake spoke. It was a big reveal, a huge one. Linda wasn't the queen of Oakwood Hills anymore. She was a thief, caught red-handed, and Jake was the one who caught her. The crowd didn't stop talking. Mrs. Carter ran out of her house, her apron still on from baking. "Jake, is that true?" she called. "You're an investigator." Jake nodded, giving her a small wave. "Yep," he said, "simple as that." Mr. Jenkins hobbled over with his cane, grinning. "Well, I'll be darned," he said. "Never would have guessed it." The kids on their bikes rode closer, shouting, "That was awesome. You're like a spy." Jake laughed a little, just a soft chuckle. He didn't brag. He didn't need to. The proof was in the handcuffs on Linda's wrists, in the police car driving away, in the shock on everyone's faces. He'd been so quiet, so sneaky, that Linda never saw him coming. She'd been too busy bossing people around, too busy yelling about his radio, to notice what he was really up to. And now she was gone, and the truth was out. The neighborhood felt different now. The air was lighter, like a big weight had lifted. Linda's rules, her clipboard, her mean looks, they didn't matter anymore. Jake had turned everything upside down, and he'd done it without raising his voice. He'd done it with that little smile, that quiet way of his. Linda's face going white, her jaw dropping, the crowd gasping. It was the biggest moment Oakwood Hills had seen in years. And it all came from Jake, the guy with the lawnmower and the radio. The police car was right there in front of Jake's house, its engine humming soft and low. The two cops, one tall with short hair, the other shorter with a hat, held Linda by her arms. Her hands were stuck behind her back in those shiny handcuffs, clicking every time she moved. She didn't go quietly, oh no. She screamed loud enough for the whole street to hear, "This isn't fair." Her voice was high and sharp, like a whistle that wouldn't stop. She twisted and pulled, trying to get free, but the cops were strong. They kept walking her toward the car, step by step. Linda's face was all red and sweaty now, not white like before. Her hair was messy, sticking out everywhere, and her eyes were wild. "I didn't do anything wrong," she yelled, looking around at the neighbors who were watching. "You can't take me. I'm the HOA president." She kept shouting, her words bouncing off the houses. But no one stepped up to help her. No one said, "Oh, poor Linda." Nope. The neighbors just stood there, some with their arms crossed, some whispering to each other. Nobody felt sorry for her. Not one bit. Jake stood by his lawnmower, watching it all happen. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Linda with that little smile, the same calm smile he'd had all day. The cops opened the back door of the police car, and Linda screamed even louder. "This is a mistake. Let me go," she cried. But the tall cop shook his head. "Get in," he said, nice but firm. The shorter cop helped push her inside, and Linda flopped onto the seat, still yelling. "You'll be sorry. All of you," she shouted as the door slammed shut. Bang. The sound was loud, like a book dropping on the floor. Inside the car, Linda kept moving, banging her shoulder against the window. Her voice was muffled now, but you could still hear her complaining. The cops didn't care. They walked around to the front, climbed in, and started the car. The engine roared a little, and then the car rolled away, slow and steady. Its tires crunched on the pavement, and Linda's screams got quieter and quieter until they were gone. The police car turned the corner, and that was it. Linda was out of sight. Jake took a deep breath. He looked around at his yard, the grass all neat and green from his mowing. The sun was still shining, and the air smelled fresh, like summer. His little black Bluetooth radio sat on the grass, quiet for now. He bent down, picked it up, and turned it back on. This time, he twisted the volume knob way up. The music came out loud and happy, filling the yard with a big, fun beat. Jake grinned a real grin, not just that little smile. "Guess I can finish my lawn now," he said, talking to nobody but himself. His voice was light, like he was happy to be free. He grabbed the lawnmower again and pushed it over to a tiny patch of grass he'd missed. The blades whirred, cutting the last few bits. The music played, bouncing around the street, and something amazing happened. The neighbors started clapping. Yep, clapping. Old Mr. Jenkins, still on his porch, smacked his hands together and cheered, "Way to go, Jake." Mrs. Carter ran out of her house, her apron flapping, and clapped too. "You're a hero," she shouted, smiling big. The kids on their bikes dropped their wheels and clapped, whooping and laughing like it was a party. Jake looked up, surprised. He didn't expect that. He waved at them, just a little wave, and kept mowing. He didn't stop to bow or cheer back. He didn't need to. He'd done his job, and that was enough for him. The neighbors kept clapping for a minute, their hands making a happy noise that mixed with the music. Then they started talking to each other, their voices loud and excited. "Can you believe it?" said Mrs. Carter to Mr. Jenkins. "Linda's gone." Mr. Jenkins nodded, tapping his cane. "Good riddance," he said, grinning. The kids rode their bikes closer to Jake's yard. "You're so cool," one of them yelled, a boy with a red cap. "You're like a secret agent." Jake laughed, just a little, and shook his head. "Nah," he said. "Just doing my job." But the kids didn't care. They kept riding in circles, shouting about how awesome he was. To them, Jake was a superhero, like someone from a comic book. He'd caught the bad guy or bad lady and saved the day. Let's slow down and think about this for a second. Linda was gone now, locked in that police car, heading to jail. She'd been the boss of Oakwood Hills for years, walking around with her clipboard, telling everyone what to do. She'd yell about trash cans being out too long or grass being too tall. She'd knock on doors and leave mean notes. Everyone was scared of her, or at least, they didn't want to argue. She made rules, and people followed them, even if they didn't like it. But not anymore. Linda's time was over, and it was all because of Jake. Jake finished that last patch of grass and turned off the lawnmower. The blade stopped spinning, and he pushed it over to the side of his house. The music from his radio kept going, loud and cheerful. He wiped his hands on his shorts and sat down on the porch steps, looking out at the street. The neighbors were still buzzing, walking around now, talking to each other. Some came out of their houses with lemonade or cookies, like it was a celebration. And maybe it was. Linda was gone, and that felt good to everyone. The sun started dipping lower in the sky, turning everything orange and pink. It was getting late, but nobody wanted to go inside yet. They were too excited. Mrs. Carter brought Jake a glass of lemonade, her smile big and warm. "Here you go, Jake," she said. "You deserve this." Jake took it and said, "Thanks." He sipped the cold drink, feeling the sweet taste on his tongue. It was nice, just what he needed after a long day. Mr. Jenkins hobbled over with his cane, still grinning. "I always knew she was up to no good," he said, pointing across the street at Linda's house. "Too bossy, that one." "But you, Jake, you fixed it?" Jake shrugged, sipping his lemonade. "Just doing what I had to," he said. He didn't brag. He didn't act like a big shot. That wasn't his way. He was quiet, calm, and happy to let the neighbors cheer for him without making a fuss. The kids kept riding their bikes, zooming up and down the street. "Jake's the best," they shouted, laughing and waving. One little girl with pigtails stopped in front of his house. "Are you gonna catch more bad guys?" she asked, her eyes big. Jake chuckled. "Maybe," he said. "We'll see." The girl giggled and pedaled off, joining her friends. They didn't know everything Jake had done, but they knew he'd made things better. That was enough for them. By Monday, 2 days later, things really started to change. The weekend had been wild, with Linda getting taken away and everyone talking about Jake. But now it was a new week, and Oakwood Hills felt different. People woke up early that Monday morning, and there was a meeting at the community center. It was a little building down the street, with a big room where the HOA always met. Usually, Linda ran those meetings, standing at the front with her clipboard, telling everyone what to do. Not today. The neighbors crowded into the room, sitting on folding chairs. They were still buzzing, whispering about Linda and Jake. Nobody knew what would happen next, but they were ready to find out. Mrs. Carter stood up at the front, her apron gone now, replaced with a nice blue shirt. She cleared her throat and smiled. "Hi, everyone," she said. "We need a new HOA leader. Linda's gone, and we can't let things fall apart." The room got quiet. People nodded, looking around. Mr. Jenkins raised his hand. "I nominate Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice loud for an old guy. Everyone clapped, cheering. "Yeah," shouted the man who lived next to Jake. "She's nice. She won't yell at us." Mrs. Carter blushed, waving her hands. "Oh, I don't know," she said. But the neighbors kept clapping, and soon she smiled. "Okay, I'll do it," she said. "But no yelling about radios, I promise." The room laughed, and just like that, the HOA had a new leader. Mrs. Carter was fair. She didn't care about silly rules. She just wanted the neighborhood to be happy and safe. People liked her. She baked cookies for everyone at Christmas. And always said hi with a smile. She wasn't like Linda at all. No clipboard. No mean looks. Just kindness. And that's what Oakwood Hills needed after all those years of Linda's bossing. What about Linda? Well, she wasn't coming back anytime soon. After the cops took her away that Saturday, she went straight to the police station. They sat her down in a little room with a table and asked her lots of questions. "Where did the HOA money go?" they said. "Why did you take it?" Linda tried to lie at first, saying, "I didn't do it." But Jake's proof was too good, those receipts, emails, and bank papers he'd collected. The cops had everything they needed, and Linda couldn't talk her way out. By Monday, the news was all over town. Linda was facing years in jail, maybe 5, maybe 10. She'd stolen a lot of money from the HOA, money that was supposed to fix the playground or pave the streets. Instead, she'd spent it on stuff for herself: fancy clothes, a new TV, even a trip to the beach. The neighbors were mad when they heard, but they were also glad. Glad she was caught. Glad she couldn't boss them anymore. Glad justice was served. Back in Oakwood Hills, life started to feel free. People left their trash cans out a little longer, and nobody cared. Kids played louder in the yards, and nobody complained. Jake mowed his lawn that Monday afternoon, his radio blasting again. This time, nobody knocked on his door or called the cops. They just waved and smiled. "Hey, Jake," called the man next door. "Good music." Jake waved back, grinning. "Thanks," he said. Things were different now, and it felt good. The neighborhood wasn't scared of rules anymore. They weren't scared of Linda's clipboard or her loud voice. They could relax, have fun, and live their lives. Jake had made that happen. He didn't brag about it, though. He didn't walk around saying, "Look what I did." Nope. He just kept being Jake, the guy with the lawnmower and the Bluetooth radio. But everyone knew the truth: he'd saved the day. Let's think about that for a minute. Jake had moved into Oakwood Hills months ago, acting like a regular guy. He'd mowed his lawn, played his music, and waved at the neighbors. But all that time, he'd been an undercover investigator, watching Linda, waiting for the right moment. He'd collected all that proof, papers and emails, without anyone noticing. He'd stayed quiet, letting Linda think she was in charge. And then, when she called the cops on him, he turned it all around. He showed everyone who she really was: a thief, not a queen. The neighbors talked about it all week. "Can you believe it?" Mrs. Carter said to Mr. Jenkins over coffee. "Jake was a hero this whole time." Mr. Jenkins nodded, sipping his drink. "Smart kid," he said. "Never saw it coming." The kids made up stories about Jake, pretending he was a spy with gadgets and secret codes. Maybe he's got a laser in that radio, one boy said, laughing. They didn't know the real story, but they didn't need to. They just knew Jake was awesome. By Tuesday, the playground got a new swing set. The money Linda stole was gone, but the neighbors chipped in to fix things up. Mrs. Carter organized it, smiling as she handed out tools. No more waiting for Linda to say yes, she said. We'll do it ourselves. Everyone helped painting benches, planting flowers, making the park pretty again. Jake showed up too, carrying a can of paint. Need a hand? He asked. The neighbors cheered, happy to have him there. Wednesday brought more changes. The street lights that Linda never fixed. They got new bulbs. The potholes in the road filled in by Thursday. Mrs. Carter didn't boss anyone, she just asked nicely, and people said yes. This is how it should be, she said at the next HOA meeting. We work together, not fight. Everyone clapped, even louder than they had for Jake. Oakwood Hills was waking up, feeling new and fresh. Linda's house sat empty across from Jake's. Her fancy curtains hung still, and her mailbox started piling up with letters. Nobody knew when she'd be back, if ever. The cops said her trial would happen soon, and all that proof Jake found would be shown to a judge. She won't get away with it, the tall cop had told Jake before driving off. You did good. Jake just nodded, sipping his lemonade, letting the neighborhood cheer for him. Friday came, and the kids threw a little party in Jake's yard. They brought juice boxes and cookies, giggling as they ran around. This is for you, Jake, said the girl with pigtails, handing him a cookie shaped like a star. Jake took it, smiling. Thanks, he said. You guys are the best. They played tag and danced to his radio, the music loud and happy. The neighbors joined in, bringing chairs and snacks. It wasn't planned, it just happened, like the whole street wanted to say thank you. Saturday rolled around again 1 week after Linda's big meltdown. Jake mowed his lawn, just like always. The radio played, the sun shone, and the air smelled like grass. But this time, nobody complained. Mrs. Carter waved from her porch. Mr. Jenkins nodded from his chair. The kids zoomed by on their bikes, shouting, "Hi, Jake." It was peaceful, but not the fake peace Linda wanted. It was real peace, happy, free, and fair. Jake didn't talk about what he'd done. He didn't need to. Everyone else did it for him. He's the guy who got rid of Linda, they'd say, smiling. The guy with the Bluetooth radio. That's what they called him now, not just Jake, but the hero who saved Oakwood Hills. He turned everything around, quiet and sneaky, without ever raising his voice. Linda was facing years in jail, and the neighborhood was finally free. Justice was served, and it felt so good. Sunday was quiet. People went to church or stayed home, resting after a big week. Jake sat on his porch, sipping water, looking out at the street. The radio was off for once, just the sound of birds and a soft breeze. He thought about Linda, about how she'd screamed as the cops took her away. He thought about the neighbors clapping, the kids cheering, the new swing set at the park. He didn't smile big or laugh out loud. He just sat there, calm as ever, knowing he'd done something good. Oakwood Hills wasn't perfect. Sometimes kids still argued, or dogs barked too loud. But it was better, way better, without Linda's rules hanging over everyone. Mrs. Carter kept things fair, and the neighbors worked together. Jake stayed the same, mowing his lawn, playing his music, waving at people. He didn't need a medal or a parade. He'd caught the bad guy, fixed the problem, and that was enough. Years later, people would still talk about it. Remember when Linda got arrested, they'd say, laughing. And Jake was a secret investigator. It became a story, a big, fun story that kids told their friends. Jake didn't mind. He just lived his life, quiet and happy, in that little house with the neat yard. The guy with the Bluetooth radio had saved the day, and Oakwood Hills would never forget it. So here's the thing, sometimes the person you think is just noise is actually the one fixing stuff quietly. Like Jake with his radio. Everyone thought he was just a guy playing music, bothering Linda. But nope. He was the hero, working sneaky and smart to make things right. And the loudest complainers? Like Linda, yelling all the time? They might be hiding big secrets. She acted like the boss, but she was the one doing bad stuff, stealing money and lying. Think about that. The quiet ones can be strong. The loud ones can be wrong. Next time someone tries to boss you around, don't get mad. Don't fight back right away. Just smile. Watch them. Listen. Because you never know who's really in charge. Maybe it's not the loud person with the rules. Maybe it's the quiet kid with a plan. Like Jake. He didn't shout or brag, he just did his job and won. So be smart. Be brave. And keep your eyes open. You might be the one who changes everything, even if nobody sees it coming.